From the Charles River in Boston, this is the Ivy League Digital Network, and today we have both Radcliffe lightweight and heavyweight rowing coming your way on the Ivy League Digital Network. We'll start with the Radcliffe lightweight crew team coming off a sweep of Princeton last weekend in the Class of '99 Cup. We'll have a Varsity 4 race between Radcliffe and Georgetown, and then a combined Varsity 8, second Varsity 8 rate. Harvard-Radcliffe will have 2 votes, the Varsity 8, and the second Varsity 8. Georgetown will have just 1 vote, a Varsity 8 boat. Run you through the lineups for this Varsity 4 head-to-head. For Radcliffe, the coxswain is sophomore Jackie Epstein. In seat 4, Sophie Altchuk, a junior. Sophomore Michaela Sandler in seat number 3. Emily Tiberia, sophomore in seat 2. And the bow seat is sophomore Gretchen Doherty. For Georgetown, Megan Walsh is the coxswain. Cleo Weinbar is the stroke. Hannah Schmidt in seat 3. Morgan Shear in seat 2. And Ali Garceau is the bow seat. Radcliffe enters this weekend in a tie for second in the national rankings, along with Boston University, just behind defending national champion Stanford. Radcliffe took second last year in the national championships behind Stanford at those IRA Nationals. Just the second weekend of the spring season for the black and white. They'll row at the Necht Cup next week. Then they'll be back here for the Lightweight Invitational on April 16th. And the Beanpot on April 23rd. Also be bringing you 2 Radcliffe heavyweight head-to-head matchups with Brown and Dartmouth later on. Today we'll have both the Varsity 8 and the second Varsity coming up around 8:30. Looking to get alignment here for the Varsity 4 race between Georgetown and Radcliffe. A sophomore heavy Varsity 4 boat for Radcliffe with a sophomore coxswain, 3 sophomore rowers, and 1 junior, Sophie Altchuk. Temperature about 50 degrees or so this morning. Slight breeze. We've had some on and off rain, but nothing consistent on the Charles. Water relatively calm, not all that choppy, especially for a day that we've seen rain, and it helps that the wind is not all that extreme. Last weekend when we were out here for the Radcliffe heavyweight rowing, it was much colder, though the wind again was pretty light, and we had calm water, which this time of year, late March, early April, you're pretty happy when you can get the calm river on the Charles. Sharing the water today with Boston College and MIT, who just got underway in a Varsity 4 race ahead of Radcliffe and Georgetown. So waiting till we get closer to the official start time of 7:36. Last weekend against Princeton for Radcliffe, it was pretty dominant 3 races. Varsity 8 won by 17 seconds. Second Varsity won by 10 seconds. Third Varsity by 12 seconds over the Tigers in that Class of '99 Cup. And Princeton entered ranked 5th in the country. Haze overhead, sun trying to peek through behind us here on the Charles, but probably a losing battle today with this cloud cover. Once again, your lineups here for the Varsity 4 race for Radcliffe. You have Jackie Epstein, the coxswain, Sophie Altchuk in seat 4, Michaela Sandler in seat 3, Emily Tiberia in seat 2, and Gretchen Doherty in that bow seat. And for Georgetown, Megan Walsh is the coxswain, Cleo Weinbar the stroke, Hannah Schmidt in seat 3, Morgan Shear in seat 2, and Ali Garceau in the bow seat. (2,000 meters between here at the start and the finish line. We have alignment. And away we go. Georgetown and Radcliffe in the Varsity 4 race. For the Hoyas of Georgetown, their first race of the spring, only their heavyweight crew rode last weekend. Early on, good start for Radcliffe. Already a slight lead as they try to pull away from Georgetown in the opening couple hundred meters. About 35 strokes per minute for Radcliffe early on, and they've already created some separation. Going to get open water very early on. Memorial Drive to our right and Sturo Drive to our left. Radcliffe accelerating into a big lead again. Led by Cox and Jackie Epstein with Sophie Elchuk, Michaela Sandler, Emily Tabiri, and Gretchen Doherty pounding out a good tempo early. Already an open water lead for Radcliffe, and we have not even reached the quarter mark yet. A minute 25 in, and Radcliffe with some separation. Unofficial stroke count of around 34 strokes a minute still for Radcliffe. Keeping that consistent tempo out of the chute and gaining on Georgetown with every single stroke. First of two races for the black and white lightweights today. Varsity 8 and second Varsity 8 will combine together to take on a Georgetown Varsity 8 boat next. Radcliffe, the runners-up last year at the IRA Nationals, ranked second in the country this season and undefeated after the win last week against Princeton. Lead continues to swell for the boat of Epstein, Altchuk, Sandler, Tabiri, and Doherty. At least a couple of boats between Radcliffe and Georgetown. First race of the year for the Hoyas, and they're four of Wienbar, Schmidt, Scheer, and Garceau, with Walsh the coxswain counting out Hoya strokes. We're about 3 minutes in. Radcliffe closing in on the midway point with a large lead over the Hoyas of Georgetown. At this point, you're racing the clock if you're Radcliffe here. 3:25 closing in on that 1,000 meter mark. Radcliffe staying pretty consistent around 33 strokes a minute on our unofficial counter. Making their way to the bridge with a large lead over Georgetown. Hoyas led by Coach Stephen Full. 30 strokes a minute now for Radcliffe. At the midway point at 4:06. So on about an 8:10 pace, Radcliffe heads underneath the bridge. For these four Radcliffe rowers, they can watch that Georgetown boat get further and further behind as they try to spur themselves forward. About an 18-second lead at the midway point as Georgetown crosses the bridge now. On a breezy but relatively warm April 2nd, temperature in the 50s. Radcliffe's lead continues to swell in the first race of the day. Glad we're racing today, not tomorrow. There's a couple inches of snow in the forecast overnight. Brings back memories of last year when you had a frozen over Charles River until late March. Much more conducive weather to rowing so far this spring. 1-0 Radcliffe building on its large lead over Georgetown. They've had open water since about the first 100 meters. Right off the start, they separated. Altchuk, Sandler, Tiberi, and Doherty under the count of Epstein, continuing to stroke consistently as they pass about 500 meters to go. Hoya's looking for a strong finish here in their final 600 meters or so of their first race of the season. Getting some of that rust shaken out in this first matchup for Georgetown. .6:15 and counting. Radcliffe inside the final 500 meters. A good way to start the day for the Radcliffe lightweight crew team with a large lead for Epstein, Altchuk, Sandler, Tiberi, and Doherty. Jackie Epstein, sophomore coxswain from San Francisco, California. Gretchen Doherty, a sophomore from Sheridan, Wyoming. As the black and white continue to stretch forward here. Sophie Altchuk Jr. from New York City. Emily Tiberi, a sophomore from Kirkland, Quebec. And then rounding out the group again is Michaela Sandler, a sophomore from nearby Wayland, Massachusetts. Dominant start for Radcliffe. They're closing in on their last 200 meters or so with a very large lead ahead of the Hoyas of Georgetown. Made their way up north from the nation's capital. .740 gone in this opening race, the Varsity 4, and Radcliffe, again, still right on that 8:15, 8:20 or so pace as they make their way towards the finishing stretch. We'll keep our eye on the flag off to our right as Radcliffe closes in on the finishing line. Well, consistent 2,000 meters for the black and white. Had the lead right out of the chute. Had open water by about 150 meters in. And their lead has grown and grown and grown the whole way. Last couple strokes for the black and white towards the line. And Radcliffe takes the Varsity 4 race in about 8 minutes and 43 seconds unofficially. Hoya's looking to bring it home, closing in on the 9-minute mark. Past 9 minutes for the Georgetown Varsity 4. A few more strokes for the Hoyas. And here's Georgetown across, about 26 seconds behind. A good start today for Radcliffe, the lightweight Varsity 4 with a 26-second win over the Hoyas of Georgetown. Coming up next, we'll have a combined varsity and second varsity 8 race. Radcliffe with 2 votes. Georgetown will race its varsity 8. That's coming up next on the Ivy League Digital Network.